leaders globally, it's clear they need to modernize, digitalize, and deliver value at speed. Agile can be the answer, but how do HR organizations develop, define, and execute an Agile strategy? During today's program, we'll hear from executives on their journey in developing an Agile strategy and discuss the impact of these strategies on their organizations. So today's speakers include Jesper Sylvest Sorensen from Milestone Systems, Linda Vestergaard from Roche, Mette Parvik from Roche, and Kenneth Nielsen from RiskPoint Insurance. Following the presentations, Jesper will moderate a panel discussion with all the speakers, and we'll take audience questions. So if you have questions again for the speaker at any time, please enter those in the chat function and we will direct those to the moderator. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Jesper Sylvest Sorensen, who is the Organizational Development Director for Milestone Systems. Jesper has been in the organizational design field for many years, working previously with multinationals such as Telenor, Shell, and Accenture. Jesper will set the scene for today's discussion. So Jesper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Therese, and thanks also to Birgitte Kreibjerg Pedersen for inviting me to this network. Those of you that know me already will know that I'm really passionate about using HR when aligning the organization with the business needs, and in this, Agile is no exception at all. As said, I work for Milestone Systems. Milestone is a tech company based in Denmark. We have about 20% growth a year, and we've had that for a number of years. And we're about 1,000 people now in 25 countries. But as you can imagine, those numbers are changing fairly often. And I joined a year ago to help the journey from startup to go up. And we're getting there shortly but surely. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about Agile. If we could change the slide, please. I think it's relevant to start out with the question, why do we need to have Agile in the first place? And some of you are probably already familiar with Dave Ulrich, but if you're not, he does a lot of research on HR. And he recently did a book where they researched what's going on in the companies that have adopted really well to recent market developments and what are their characteristics. And you see those here on the right-hand side. And if you look through the list of these things, I'm pretty sure that you can recognize one or two things that's been spoken about in your business. And you may already have been asked to deliver on some of those elements because you can say the sum of a lot of conversations. These could reflect what could be known as Agile capabilities. And for a lot of companies, the ability to deliver on those capabilities will be the difference between making it or not. If we could go to the next slide, please. So you're going to probably be asked to deliver on a lot of these elements in HR. And when you look through the elements, a lot of those elements aren't necessarily things that we've done before in HR. It's not things that are particularly stable either. So we're going to see a need to pivot quite often. And it's going to be very difficult to apply best practice. So if we had the business come and tell us that they were facing these kind of challenges, what we would tell them that they should be doing. If it was me, I would definitely tell them to figure out what is run and maintain and what's innovation, so that you can apply standard optimized solutions for the non-innovative stuff and free up capacity to do innovation for the places where you really need to develop something where you have no clue what the end in mind looks like. And when you do innovation, you can use a number of frameworks. You can use Google Venture Sprints, you can use SAFe. There are many different toolkits out there. But what goes through most of them is the application of design thinking, i.e. you really try to understand the problem to be solved. Because when you don't know what the end in mind look like, then you need to focus on understanding what the problem to be solved is. And to do that, you need some serious customer immersion. You need to be able to develop a problem to be solved statement that you can test against different things that you can experiment with in that way. And once you have tested a lot and failed a lot, then you probably learned a lot, and then you've learned what worked, and then you can scale what works. This is some of the things that go through a lot of these different methodologies. And when you're doing those kind of things, it's very important that you gather a relatively small team with end-to-end understanding of the problem to be solved, so that they can work on that problem to be solved together and develop it. And they will normally work in sprints. These are the things we would normally tell, or I would at least tell the business that they should focus on getting right if they need to deliver this kind of stuff. Could you give me the next element? Thanks a lot. So when I look at what we do in HR very often at the moment, we are actually making some headway. So there is a lot of HR units that have applied a framework where they actually make it easier to differentiate between operational stuff and innovation. A lot have applied the classic model where you have essential HR operations, you have HR partners, and then you have centers of excellence or HR development teams or whatever they're called. They have different names, but basically those would be the strategic HR elements. And that's making it easier to differentiate between operation and innovation and hedge capacity for one and the other. So we get both. The second thing around design thinking is actually starting to be applied in some of the specialist areas. You're seeing it a lot in organization design, starting to see more and more in telemanagement, where basically a diagnostic is done to understand the problem to be solved, instead of applying best practice and looking at your experience and say, okay, what did we do in so-and-so company, and let's tweak it a little bit and apply the same thing again. That doesn't work for the kind of problems where it's something that's new in nature and we have to invent stuff. Where we're struggling a little bit, and granted, there are things happening, but you've probably heard guys like Dave Ulrich talk about an outside-in approach or customer-centric methods. And some HR partners are also starting to do some of this. But I think it would be unfair to say that we'll nail the involvement of external parties and customers and owners in when we design new HR initiatives to make our organizations more agile. And the last thing around cross-functional sprint teams, I've yet to see an actual cross-functional sprint team in an HR unit or run out of HR. I hope to see one soon, but I actually haven't seen one yet. So if you compare what we tell the business to do when they have to deliver in Agile and what we're doing in HR when we have to deliver Agile, those are not exactly the same things. So we've got something to work on. Could you go to the next slide, please? So when I look at what we're doing in Milestone at the moment, you'll see that we are not in a very different place. We've done some things around getting the structures in place, getting some of the skills. We're working on really trying to understand where is it that we need to be unique and do innovation, and where is it that we can apply best practice and standard solutions. How do we hedge time to make sure that we get innovation done? Because we have a tendency of really getting the operational things getting in the way of doing innovation. And a lot of the stuff that requires innovation is the stuff that really adds value to our business partners. And then we're looking into using that hedge capacity for running sprints, but we haven't cracked that yet. And how we run the sprints in a way where we get more outside in perspective. If you're looking at a list of some of the stuff we're working on, you'll see that it resonates quite well with a number of things in the Dave Ulrich slide. So probably that's our list, and you probably have something similar. Could we go to the next slide, please? So for me, I think what we're going to be looking into in HR in the coming year and two is really if we want to build the capabilities on the right-hand side, and we probably have to for our companies to thrive. How do we get much better at customer-centric? How do we get better at outside-in approach? and how do we get better at designing scalable solutions in cross-functional teams. Hopefully this will have jogged your curiousness, because that's the tee up for this day today on Agile in HR.
Excellent. Thank you, Jesper. Does anybody have any questions for Jesper before we move on? Let's see if we have anything. Jesper, I had a question for you regarding organizational culture when designing an agile function. I saw you mention that, but you know, how important is organizational culture when you're developing this type of program?
I think if I look at Milestone specifically, but also in other companies that I've seen, if your legacy values and leadership model does not support a culture that's aligned with Agile, then in my mind, that's where you need to start. Because if you have a culture, and most often culture is built by our values and our leadership model, or at least that's a big part of shaping it, then you won't get very far. And I've seen lots of companies work on very elaborate methods of how do you do sprints and Google Venture and whatnot, but they clash into an executive level where they get questions on risk management and detailed planning, and that doesn't really work very well when you're doing innovation. So it's super important.
Okay, all right, great. And we have another function. We have a question from the chat from Anne Marie at Lundgren's. How do you define Agile in your organization in HR? Are your employees familiar with that definition?
Yeah, we actually try not to, because it gets into a bit of a religious debate, to be honest. So we try to look a little bit more at what is it that we need to be good at, and what it is that we need to develop. And I'm actually working with the business to understand how do we define a lot of the Agile concepts for all of Milestone, because it is confusing when everybody uses different terminology.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly the reason we wanted to have this event today, is because while we kick off this Agile HR theme, there was a lot of questions about, you know, what does it mean? And I think the answer was exactly what, as you said, people are using that terminology very differently. It looks like we have another question. Can you talk about the HR organization? Sorry, hold on. Can you please elaborate? Sorry, I'm missing one here. Can you talk about the HR organizational design implications to support this differentiated approach to work on both operational and innovative tasks? Are the same people involved, or how do you manage this with the HR team?
Well, it's a yes and no, because some of this is in the organization design. It's very, very difficult to do this if you have everybody doing the same thing, basically. If you look at how we did HR 20 years ago, then a lot of people were doing stuff. And that makes it super hard to differentiate. So part of it, one of the enablers, it's a necessary but not sufficient variable, is to basically start hedging capacity for some of these things. And the most classical way of doing it is separating HR into operations, partnering, and then specialist teams. And you see that happening many, many places. The second element, which is the necessary element in my mind, is to have a really solid strategy that allows you to be flexible on the short run and really understand where do you need to be unique, and where do you need to develop, and where do you need to invest, and where do you need to not do it, and really go standard and go with best practice. And I think if you aren't able to do that, then you won't get very much innovation done, because there are a lot of operational things that still won't go away no matter what you do.
Okay, good. All right, we have another one more question here. Can you please elaborate on the concept of cross-functional sprint teams?
Yeah, we'll probably talk about the rest of the day. But in general, what you try to do is to make sure that there is a small group of people that have dedicated time to work on this, and that in that group of people, you have, you can say, end-to-end understanding of the problem to be solved. So that would mean, let's say, if you have classic business development, you could probably bring in someone from customer service or distribution and manufacturing, and someone from business development and commercial and sales. The whole idea is that if you are working on something, you have end-to-end understanding. In software development, that would mean that you have somebody that is coding, that you have someone doing UX, and you have various other profiles. So there isn't kind of a set number of roles. The important bit here is that you have sufficient knowledge in the room to understand the end-to-end problem to be solved, and you don't have too many people in there, because then it just isn't fast enough. That's the short version of cross-functional teams.
That's great. I'm pretty sure we'll be hitting on that again a little bit later on. So now it's time to move on. Thank you for that, Jesper. We'll hear from you a little bit later. Now I'd like to introduce Linda Vestergaard, who is the HR director at Roche and also a member of the HR committee steering group, along with Mette Parving, who is the Agile coach at Roche. And together, they will share Roche's Agile HR strategy. So Linda, Mette, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Therese. We are thrilled to be here. We've been looking forward, haven't we, Mette?
Yes, indeed.
And if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So we are going to talk you through how the HR team and our Agile team have worked together on the Agile transformation in Roche, Denmark. We will also talk about the reasons why we wanted to change. We will show you how we have involved the entire organization actually in doing this, and also the learning successes and roadblockers that we have met with. So Mette, do you want to start by describing how we work together in preparing the organization?
Yes. The next slide, please. So how HR and business agility, we have actually worked together for quite some time, really to grow our organization into becoming an agile and learning organization. And actually, Jesper, you just touched upon it. It's actually a journey, because we started back in 2018. We started looking into the GROW model, and I would assume that a lot of you know it. But the GROW model is really about a coaching framework, which is really something that we can use in our everyday leadership, really to unlock the potential and possibilities as our colleagues can develop. So first, we looked into that model, and at the same time, we looked into the growth mindset. So what you see here on the pictures is really Linda and I trying to give some seeds into the organization, because we really wanted people to think about, how can I grow as a colleague, as an employee, and grow my competences and capabilities, really to be able to be fit for the future, which is here now. And at the same time, I think, Jesper, you just said it, design thinking is a method. We really wanted to look into this, how can we kick off a design thinking method and at the same time really be customer focused, because that's what it's all about. We want to understand where our pain points are with the customers, and really to understand where they are, to be able to actually create solutions to help them. So what we did was, if we can go to the next slide, was when you see this little guy here, he's with his hand above his head, because it's really innovation coming your way. We need to innovate as a company, as an organization. So what we did was, we had an innovation day to create new ways of working, and really for everybody to get on board in how can I be a part of innovation, and how can I become agile, and really to create healthcare solutions going beyond the pill. And I'll just tap a little bit into going beyond the pill, because it's all about having a product. Maybe we had that in the years past, but now our business model is changing. So we need to go beyond that. So we need to find out what are the pain points with our customers, and really at the same time try to create innovative solutions together with them, which is a part of the co-creation product or process. So we needed to really have a huge change. So what did we actually do, Linda?
Yeah, if I could have the next slide, please. If I could have the next slide, please. Yeah, I just want to talk a bit about why we wanted to work in an agile way. So we were seeing in the leadership team that our product portfolio was changing, developing into a portfolio which was serving smaller patient groups. There was changes in our environment, in the marketing dynamics. We could see that Global Rush was also starting to look at the agile way of working. And we heard from our employees through Great Place to Work surveys, through some strategy work we did together, that actually they thought we could be more agile. We could have leaner processes. We could have shorter decision making. We could, I'm sorry, I just shorter decision making. Shorter decision-making processes and a less hierarchical setup in our organization. And next slide, please. So as a leadership team, we thought, how can we involve our colleagues? So we created 4 design teams, and exactly as Jesper was touching upon, it was colleagues with different backgrounds and from different parts of the organization. And we said, okay, we want these teams to have 4 different focus areas, but the sort of the main task was to look at how can we create a more agile organization. And Mette, you were actually part of one of these design teams. So can you say a few words about what was it like to work in that way?
I mean, I think that you just said it, Jesper, before. It's an autonomous team. I was leading the team with going beyond the pill, and it was really interesting for me to experience. We were like 9 different people from different parts of the organization, and we actually had to come up with a new org design within. We actually worked for 1 week. We came back socializing with the rest of the organization, worked for 1 week more. And then we actually came back to the leadership team with our solution on how do we think that we should go forward. And it was a great experience. And I think that all of the 4 different design teams really experienced this high-performing team culture. We had everyday stand-ups. We had every day where we actually had a tune-out. So we came very close together. So it was a great experience. And yeah, just experiencing it, I think that you became an advocate. So a lot of us came back, really thought, okay, this is the way to go forward.
Yeah, and as you say, Mette, actually more than 1/3 of the organization was involved in the design teams, and the rest of the organization was consulted and could give their feedback. So what we heard afterwards was that everybody felt that they'd been heard. Mm-hmm. So 80% of the suggested changes were actually implemented. And you know, when the design teams came back with all their recommendations, I think that we as a leadership team thought, oh my God, there's so much here. How can we get all that boiled down in 1 week to a new organization? But that actually was not as bad as we thought or as difficult as we thought, exactly because the changes were pretty similar and we could implement 80% of them. One of the things that the design teams suggested was that we should remove the line management layer. And we did, and I think, you know, there were also line managers involved in the design teams. And they have put in this idea that let's suggest, and I don't think they really thought that we would go with it, but we did. So some of them were a bit shocked afterwards, but we would like this very flat organization. So today we have a leadership team with the GM and everybody's reporting to us. We also created 37 new roles. We closed down some old roles. And then we did a lot of recruitment, of course. We're busy recruiting to find the very best talent for this future organization. And if you would change the slide, please. Then here you see what our org chart looks like today. So we have the customer in the middle. We are truly customer-centric. Around the customer, we have the 4 squads, which are business teams. In the business teams or in the squads, we have a squad leader in each. But apart from that, it's not a fixed team. The team members come from the centers that sit in the organization around it. You can see the big circle around the squads. And these centers are actually the home of our employees. And the center head is coaching and developing his or her team. It's quite big teams we have, but they're self-leading, so it works perfectly. And the center heads then, together with Richard Wright, who's our GM, become the leadership team, or the enablement team, as we call it today. You see in the lower right part that we have the Innovation Lab, just as Mette talked about before. This is the Innovation Lab who works together with our customers to create new solutions, just as the customer wants, not what we think is right. And can come with their ideas to the Innovation Lab and what they've heard from the customer that they need, and then they create it. So one thing is that we have created a new organization. Another thing is that we also needed to build the new capabilities. So do you want to touch upon that?
Yes, thank you. Could we go to the next slide, please? As you just highlighted, Linda, I mean, building new capabilities really to support the learning and experimenting this organization, we needed to build some new capabilities. And I think that we just said it before, I mean, customer centricity is the heart of our organization. So we really need to touch upon, I mean, what if the customers want different things? And that's a part of actually understanding the customers. So there we use a lot of design thinking and really train everybody to have this design thinking method, a part of your tool, which is a part of our toolbox. At the same time, the toolbox that we wanted to highlight here today is really, I mean, being agile is not something you just do. You need some tools, you need some frameworks, and I think that we have implemented Scrum. We are also using Kanban. We're also using different elements from SAFe. So I think that what we're using different kind of tools to actually become agile. At the same time, it's about enabling us to work agile. So we need to have some processes to help us out. At the same time, Jesper, you said it in the start around these autonomous teams, or I don't know how you said it, but I mean, working in these small teams, they are self-leading. They need to be able to actually give feedback. So there we have also been building on people's capabilities in giving feedback. And we do retros at every single sprint that the squads have been doing. So whenever we have worked for a period of time, we have retrospectives where we really highlight, so what have we been doing good? What could we do better? What are our learnings? And really, what about our mindset? So really becoming agile is also about doing it, but also being it. So that's a very important thing that we're trying to really build in our organization. And then I think one last thing for us, we have been looking very much into training and support by HR and myself. So we are doing kind of a lot of training and support. And we also have 2 Scrum Masters who are really pushing together with our squad leaders and driving this transformation into really truly become customer centered. So yeah, I think that we have also had some good learnings, Linda, some great successes. However, we've also seen some roadblockers, I think. So if we take it to the next slide, maybe Linda, you would, could we have the next slide, please? Linda, it might be that you would touch a little bit upon, I mean, our learning successes in terms of feedback.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mette. Yeah, we did a lot last year to actually roll out the feedback model to our people. And we did 3-day training in total. So we thought, okay, that's a lot. So now we're there. But I mean, we have to realize, as with every change, that people learn at different paces, and not all think that it's lovely to go to a colleague and say, I would like to give you some feedback. So Mette and I are again now working with all the centers in order to reintroduce the feedback. I mean, we have a culture where people are very close, or some call it a family culture, and it can sometimes be an obstacle because people don't want to ruin the close relationship they have with someone by giving them feedback. So we have to talk again and again about development, and you can't develop if you don't get feedback, and you are actually a bad colleague if you don't give your colleague feedback, etc. But it's a constant sort of, we will never get out of work, Mette and I will keep on working on it.
Okay. So
Yeah.
just a second, Mette, before we move on, there was a question from Brigitte Peterson from IFF for Linda specifically. How did you communicate or link your actions to the suggested changes? Often employees do not notice the link from engagement surveys to the actions leadership takes. And the next time they're asked, they score low on if anything happened as a result of last year's survey. So curious to learn from how you clearly got it right.
Yeah, thank you for that question. No, but that's very true. I mean, I think it's essential when we ask, for example, we use Great Place to Work, that we are very clear about what came out of that survey and what are we working on. So we have been communicating a lot around our action plans. Also, when we went live with the organizational change, it was part of our why, as you saw on this slide, and also how we explain to the organization that we are doing this because you've told us to, and we are doing these changes because you have suggested them. So I think it's a matter of communicating. And we were getting to a point during that agile change where people said to us, we don't want to hear anymore about the why and all these slides you're showing all the time. But actually it, as I will show you in a minute, it actually had a very positive effect for us that we kept on communicating, so people understood what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Okay, you know, there's another question for both of you along the same lines, and that is, how do you interact with your global colleagues or colleagues outside of Denmark when you're working in an agile way? Is this something that you're setting up across countries? Do you want me to, or should I?
Yeah, I could go. I mean, it's actually also the global, Rush Global is also a part of this transformation, but Denmark was the pioneer together with Canada and the Netherlands. So of course we've had some, I mean, talking about roadblockers, sometimes we can actually bump into some very micromanagement things across borders. But at the same time, I mean, now 2 years ahead, every country is actually getting under the way. So I think that what we're seeing is we're now developing global Rush as well into a network organization. So what we see is that actually Denmark is on the, I think that Richard Wright, our GM, would call it, we are one of the pioneers within Roche actually. So they're looking towards us, and often they are asking us, so what did you do and what can we learn from you? So, but it's of course sometimes we see that we're bumping a little bit into some of the other countries who have not yet been in their maturity level where we are as an organization.
Right. Okay. Thank you, and good work.
Thank you.
Yes.
Linda, should we go? Yeah, maybe we should just touch a little bit upon some learnings in regards to agile mindset. I think very important learning from us is we need to reiterate why we're doing these things. Why do we need this mindset? Why do we actually want us to experiment and learn? And I think that one of the roadblockers in this area is sometimes we actually forget that we need to work on our own mind. I mean, all of us, both leadership team, myself as a colleague or employee in Roche, because it's not like you just wake up tomorrow and now I'm agile. I need some tools, I need some training, and I also need to start to implement it myself and learn. And I think that we learn in different levels. So I think that's very important for us as leaders in an organization to understand that we learn in different levels. So the maturity level can be a little bit different at times. However, I do think that we are really getting people on board, and I mean, it's for myself and a lot of the colleagues, I mean, it's a great journey. It really is. Linda, another key thing was really the autonomy and structure. Can I just go a little bit along that, and we can tap in? Yeah.
Sure.
Because I just have an example on when we started the transformation. I think that what we saw was the leadership team really being so willing to give us all this autonomy, and that was great. But at the same time, I just talked a little bit about the maturity level. We were not there, all of us, in our mindset. So it was actually difficult to take all of this autonomy on hand. So autonomy and leadership or structure really goes hand in hand. So I think that was a very important learning in the start. Building people's capabilities takes some time, but at the same time, we need structure. And it's not like being agile is without structure. There's a lot of structure, a lot of guardrails. So it really goes hand in hand. Wasn't that, I mean, we have been talking kind of a lot of that around that, Linda, haven't we?
Yeah, I fully agree, Mid. Yeah, fully agree. Yeah.
And last but not least, I think that another key learning is really building new capabilities. That's a key priority for us as an organization, for me as a colleague, an employee, as a leader. I think it's so important for us all to build new capabilities and really to have the ability to change. Because, I mean, we want to be customer focused. However, you need to also focus on getting there yourself and also as an organization. And that is definitely really something that we're focusing on every single day. We're talking about customers. We're trying to really figure out how can we become even much more of a partner than we are today in the external environment that we're operating in. However, Linda, we have also had some great successes, I think.
Yes, I think we have. And if we could have the next slide, please. I think from an HR chair, it was amazing. So 4 months after we started the transformation, we were #1 in the Great Place to Work survey amongst the middle-sized companies. And we were both very, very surprised and very, very proud. And to my previous comment about communication, I mean, what we saw in the feedback from our employees was that they thought it was so great they've been involved, they'd been heard, the feedback they'd given previously, and that we had communicated so much about what we were doing and why we were doing it. Mm. We have seen many other successes, I think, coming out of this. I mean, the way that we are able today to co-create with our customers, as you mentioned before, Mette, how we work much smarter now, that not everything has to be 100% perfect. But that we co-create together and that we build solutions as we go. So, you know, there are many successes we could mention. And then last but not least, we have just in November last year we did a small adjustment to our agile organization, which we will of course keep on doing. But it actually turned out to be relatively big when we see it with our colleagues' eyes, but still, we just last year we were nominated #2 in the Great Place to Work survey. So again, I mean, we've been able to make big changes and get our colleagues with us. So we are very proud of that. And I think that could actually be our last words, Mette, unless you have just a closing comment.
No, I just as a colleague and leader in Roche, I'm just really proud of, I mean, being a part of an organization who have made a huge change and at the same time really gotten people on board and really seeing colleagues develop. And I think that we see it all over the organization and just seeing the last result on Great Places to Work. We came in second. We lost to Gentofte Activity Center, which is also really cool. Yeah, so cool. and I just think that I just want to say that I'm proud of being in a part of an organization like this, because we learn a lot and we develop. So I think that Yeah. Let's open for questions.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you guys very much. That's great. We do have one quick question for the two of you. So we're going to, let's see, we'll move on to Kenneth in just a moment. But there was a couple people who asked about how are you handling Agile in a COVID setting when a lot of this is virtual. So, yeah, Linda, Mette?
Do you want me or should I?
Yeah, just go on.
Yeah, but I mean, we are continuing with the agile way of working. We have adapted several different digital tools so that we can still co-create and work together. So we just proceed. I mean, there's no change in that.
And I just to comment on it, I think that what we actually have seen is that it's, of course you can work agile even though that we're working virtually. Why not? I mean, we can still co-create with each other and create great solutions. It's just a matter of adapting and adjusting and doing it together with the teams. So I think that that's definitely not a problem.
No, and it's exactly as you say, Mette, when we have been through the growth mindset and the agile mindset, then everything can be done. You just find a solution.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Well, thanks to both of you. Now we will move on. So now I'm pleased to introduce Kenneth Nielsen, who is the CEO of RiskPoint Insurance. And speaking from a practical perspective, Kenneth will talk about how his organization handled extensive personnel hiring over the past year. Kenneth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I can't say good to see you all, but hopefully you can see me. And thank you for this opportunity, Therese. RiskPoint might not be known by all of you, so just a few headlines on RiskPoint. We are a company that specialized in the insurance world, offering specialized insurances mainly within renewable energy and directors and officers liability. And we are today now in 10 countries. Lately, we established ourselves in the US, opening an office in January. Our company is established back in 1917, so we have more than 100 years under the belt, so to speak, and rebranded back in 2007, where I took over the company together with a couple of colleagues. But really, as a new startup of the history of the company, and what I will share with you today is actually from startup and then growing up and experiences coming from that. So next slide, please. So today, I think it's fair to say that we kind of will be the odd case because RiskPoint have not really had a dedicated HR strategy. So starting from basically scratch and now being 125 employees in 13 years. And without having a HR strategy and certainly not a agile one, leads one to kind of reflect. But next slide, please. So actually, when thinking a little bit back in time, and I will share that with you in a minute, we will have a dedicated HR department and resources actually within a week from now on. But the analysis that was undertaken by the team that will join us now, they came to me and said, do you actually realize that since 1st Jan 2020, out of the 125 people you have onboarded 45. And I knew that we onboarded a lot of people, not just in Denmark, but actually across Europe. And as said, even engaging in hiring people for the US and establish ourselves in the US. And that actually was despite of the COVID situation, where we all have learned certainly to work in different ways, maybe to some extent more efficiently, but certainly we have to adjust and adapt. But it was a reflection where you say, without having a dedicated HR strategy, how did you actually manage to onboard so many people and I guess, and again, also across so many countries. Next slide, please. And I think the best answer I can give to that is actually that we believe that we within RiskPoint have a very, very strong culture. And there is a famous saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. It is not to say that culture will always be with you. It's certainly something that you need to maintain, and obviously you also need to build strategies around to support the business, and even also from an HR perspective. But I think our reflection is really that we perceive, at least ourselves, that we have a very, very strong culture that is also very entrepreneurial, where you simply have to adapt for changes in the world. And certainly we have all experienced that the whole COVID pandemic has certainly been a massive change for society and even businesses. And it's only for those organizations that are actually able to adapt that will survive. Please, next slide. So speaking a little bit about our culture, and that is really coming from our core values. I always start on the very right-hand side to say that we believe that people working for RiskPoint should certainly have a strong drive and dedication. It's dangerous to say this in a Danish context because Denmark, tends to be, we as a Danish culture, we are happy to settle. And what I mean by that is one of our values that we want to be part of a winning team. Whenever we are conducting businesses or in any function that we undertake, in any process, we are striving to do the best possible work in every details and matters in our workflow. And being part of a winning team is also a high demand to your fellow colleagues, and it also creates a lot of accountability. And so a lot of drive and dedication, being part and proud of being part of a winning team. So not just participating for the sake of participating, but actually that you have a responsibility and an ownership to your fellow colleagues. But I normally also say that there are many ways of winning. We need to win with respect. We need to be winning by transparency, honesty, both to our colleagues, but obviously also to our outside world and stakeholders. Normally I use the example of Tour de France, that we always ask the question that whomever won the yellow jersey, what kind of drug did that individual actually take? So the only way we know winning is actually 10% talent and then 90% hard work. And I think that is, a very core component of our culture and the way that we actually work together within the RiskPoint family. Next slide, please. So coming from a reflection on Agile HR, I can't say that I have the textbook reading of HR agility, but I think some of the resemblances in the way that our organization is structured. We are a know-how-based company. We don't have any production plans whatsoever. So all our product is basically knowledge-based in offering insurance products to the market and our customers. And it really requires a lot of specialism. We have country managers that owns a strategy within country for the business or for the products that needs to be distributed, offered, developed. But we also need very strong technical people within what we define as center of excellence. So we need specialists within products and also within functions in order to be as strong and as efficient both across products, but equally across countries, and also having best practices that we can learn from. And it means that when we speak about people working cross-function, for us, that's about product development. How can we have two product areas that engage and even go to market, both in country where they might be operating, but also thinking how can they support in another country where there might be other colleagues that normally would take the lead, but they engage and share best practices. And that is just a part of the DNA of our company, that we need to work closely together across lines, across borders, to come up with the best possible solutions. I did pay notice that, in the previous presentations, actually to share knowledge is a very strong asset. And I believe that we are embracing that without, as said, having a defined strategy for it. But given the fact that we now have grown the company up to 125 people, and again, as said, in 10 different countries, we certainly also need to take due care and set a strong focus on our biggest asset being people. So we will have, as said, a dedicated HR function as of 1st of April. Next slide, please. So agility, as said, we have a matrix organization. We have country managers, and then we have center of excellences. We call it a mom and dad management. It means that any given employee will have, in principle, 2 managers. They will have the country head, and they will also have the COE head. So they will report to a country manager, and they will also report to a center of excellence within their area of specialism. And that really gives a very strong synergy between a country manager and a COE in actually developing any employee about weaknesses, next steps. So there's a close ownership for both of them. Really, as a mom and dad, we don't want to live without either of them. And they play different roles, and it's important for anyone to have, those elements of the matrix. We have embracing that people are having regular touchdowns. It's about what we believe is actually caring is sharing. So the more that you're involved with people, walk the talk, not just on an annual year-end appraisal. It's important also to get feedback from employees about how they could see we could improve processes. It might be, informal discussions about product development or even next steps within their career or developments that they would like to take. We also have really a strong ability to adapt into change. We talk about actually change is good. We know that the outside world is changing a lot, and certainly the pandemic here has taught us in a hard way to adapt to change. But we all need, as a culture, I believe, in many, many companies and industries, we need to adapt change. And that also means that, from my perspective, HR is playing an important role. And certainly when we speak about the agility within any given organization, that the HR department are actually able to support that for any business. Next slide, please.
Kenneth, before you move on, keep the same slide. We have a question. Can you elaborate on the mom and dad role? How do they stay connected on what needs to happen, and what role does HR have in that process?
As said, HR do not today have a specific dedicated role in that. But I can today, where you have any given employee that has a task within a center of excellence, which in our business is a line of business. You could say the country manager obviously have a close cooperation or observance to any given employee in country. The center of excellence might not necessarily be in that specific country, but might sit in a different country. So it's important for the center of excellence to understand, the resource that I have dedicated to a certain product. I teach the individual about the specialism within the product, the guidelines. In our world, it's also about the risk evaluation of any given risk. That relies, the technical aspects of that very much rely on the technical competence area, whereas the country manager might not have that level of specialism. So a certain employee can come to the country manager, ask for guidance on any given technical aspect, but there might be a certain limitation across all our products for any country manager on all those products, where the country manager might turn to the center of excellence. The correlation between the two is really that they talk about what are the next step development plans. It might be that an employee are struggling with a certain area. The country manager might have a better connection with the local employee and might convey where the weaknesses and areas for putting effort and focus should be for the center of excellence. And similar, it might be that the center of excellence have a plan for, there might be a strong talent that we would like to develop and would like to, offer this individual a position, say, in a different country. But that might create a hole or, that the local country needs to find a substitute. But the local country manager should actually see that really what we want is to have the strong development of people, and we should not, stand in their way of promotions. So it's really for the two of them to work within the matrix. What is actually the best way how we can evolve any given employee within the organization. And that could even be, for the country manager to speak to a certain center of excellence that the employee would like to change into a different center of excellence to learn new things. So there is a strong coalition between the two. I don't know whether that answers the question.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kenneth.
Moving on, please. So some of the learnings we have had is that as a reflection, Denmark is within Riskpoint is the largest operation out of the 125. We are about 55 people. Some of the center of excellences, meaning the head of products areas, are sitting in Denmark. Some are sitting in Norway, some in Sweden, and so forth. But the majority is sitting in Denmark. And there's a natural, when people are in office, there's a natural, you could say, natural habit that you speak more maybe to your local employees compared to the ones sitting abroad. But suddenly the virtual world has suddenly learned us that you're actually in the same distance to all your employees, whether they are sitting in the US, whether they're sitting in Spain or Norway as a Dane or anywhere else, everybody is like 40 centimeters from you. So suddenly there was a great opportunity to making sure that people were feeling very closely connected from a COE level. Similar, the strong culture within the company and the willingness to really adapt and work in teams or soon to the point where we have also learned having internal seminars in terms of education, again, cross-border, cross-country. We have had to adapt also to make sure that we are meeting our market. So just the fact that we are now having webinars with our customers and distribution. But again, it's also a reflection from an HR perspective that suddenly there are new needs to our employees. They are not normally customized with meeting their market online. They might have to work on virtual presentation techniques. How should I stand? How should I sit? And that even goes for myself. But that are new learnings that actually the HR department also could work with the product areas about how to better improve the capabilities and the toolbox of the employees. So we have a lot of green flags. We certainly also have a red flag because, as said in the beginning, a reflection for us in how we perceive being successful in onboarding 45 people or 1/3 of the company is really about our culture. But of course, as part of growing up, and your culture is really key. How do you actually perceive and grow your culture going forward? And that is certainly a red flag for us. Hence also why I would like to put HR more on the agenda for Riskpoint. Next slide, please. So as said, we have product areas, we have operational areas as a center of excellence, but not really having had any HR dedicated center of excellence. So we will have that now in place as of 1st of April, as said. And really for me, HR is obviously how can that support and enable the company, meaning us, me, to execute on our strategies, making sure that we have the right people, the right structure in terms of certain talent building. It's not like you can go to university and learn about our business. It's something where you need to learn from what we actually, in all humbleness, are saying from the masters. For us, it's a hand craftsmanship to learn. Working within specialized insurances, as I said, you can't go to school and learn that. You need to learn that from somebody that is very experienced, but we certainly also need to build a pipeline of young talent that can be the future within our company and for our business. So we have now a talent program, again, not structured. That's why we need HR also to come in and put some structure to it, to take ownership of our talent program, and equally also in terms of onboarding. And given the fact that, at least at this point, we now have been in operation for 13, 14 years, we also have people that are looking for next steps, being a managerial role, and obviously you need to talk about development plans and what kind of needs you might have for further education and the like. So without us, aiming to be the underwriter of choice as we define ourselves within our industry, we certainly also have a vision that we would like to be the employer of choice. I'm glad that I'm not competing with Roche, but we are within the insurance, so hopefully I can be number one within the insurance industry in order to be the employer of choice. So next slide, please. So again, for us and for me, the key part is really, it's all about culture, and from that we can build strong strategies. And we perceive our business and our culture to be very agile. And we also have, obviously, a very entrepreneurial spirit. And how that fits into the definition of HR agile strategy, you can certainly challenge me on that. But I think culture is really a key component also to have a very strong agile HR strategy, and I think actually Jesper did touch upon that in his opening statements. So, any questions?
Thanks, Kenneth. That's great, and thank you so much for that perspective. I think it's definitely interesting to hear from you as well as HR about this topic. So I think we should go ahead and move on to. We have a few minutes left for a Q&A. Now I would like to introduce Jesper again, who's going to moderate the discussion. So Jesper, why don't you go ahead and get started, and be sure to write your questions, of course, in the chat function, and we'll get to as many of those as possible.
It's interesting because there was one very important point mentioned by Linda and Mette, which was around working agile with COVID-19, where you brought up the fact that agile is not the absence of structure. There is a lot of discipline and processes. And Kenneth, you're highlighting the fact that you have an entrepreneurial culture. And quite often entrepreneurial bumps hard into discipline, structure, and processes. Could you elaborate a little bit, Kenneth, on how do you experience that dilemma?
Yeah, you're quite right that I think one of the learnings in our evolution is certainly that you feel that you have a catch-up as you are building a business, you evolve, you're onboarding people, and you start to see that you have a catch-up struggle.
Kenneth, sorry to interrupt. Can you please put your camera on? If all the speakers would put their cameras on for this part of the discussion.
I can actually see Kenneth. Sorry.
Oh, you can. I'm sorry. I'm not seeing. All right.
No, you turned it
Sorry,
off again,
I'm really
Kenneth.
sorry to interrupt.
You see me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
loud and clear.
So I think 18 months ago, we started actually to set HR on the agenda in terms of us needing a dedicated, ownership as a center of excellence for HR matters. Yes, we have the mom and dad organization, as I define it, in terms of the matrix, but we could certainly also see that within country, within line of businesses, there were different initiatives that was very good from an HR perspective, but they need a structure. Also to say that certain elements in one country would certainly be something that could be scalable into other countries, but somebody needs to take the ownership of that. So that is a dilemma, and that's exactly why we see that we need this, HR focus in order to build strategies around that, to align the good efforts, but really, how can we be a catalyst, for it to become exponential for all the good things, and not to be a blocking.
But maybe we should ask Linda and Mette on that one, because you've just spent a couple of years doing exactly that. What's your experience in terms of how much discipline and structure and standardization and the like do you actually need when you run these agile teams? Is it a free for all flex, or is it super disciplined, or what's your experience with that? Because I know there's lots of different perceptions out there.
Yeah, well, I think you need sort of the frame around it, the framework around it, and then people can operate. Then your colleagues can operate within those frames. And one example we saw when we first started was that we agreed in the leadership team we shouldn't have regular meetings because that reminded us too much of the old way. But we very soon found out that if we then found out Tuesday morning, oops, there's something we need to discuss, then none of us had an opening in our calendars, right? So we needed that structure. So it has been interesting to see that you can't just let loose So I would say that have the guardrails, the frames, and then let your colleagues operate within those frames as they want in the self-leading teams.
Made anything to add?
Can I add a little bit, Jesper?
Of course.
I'm just, besides what Linda is highlighting, I think that in Roche we are using the Scrum Framework, where within the framework we have the roles, we have the different events. So that is also a part of the frame that you work in as an autonomous team. So that is also something which actually helps the teams, and at the same time trying to actually find out as a team, what is it that we're trying to achieve? I mean, what's actually our purpose? How do we want to collaborate? So for myself as the Agile coach, I'm trying to actually help the teams work within the frame and actually build them as a team. So I think that's very important, because it's not like an anarchy. You're just doing whatever you want to do. You actually have autonomy and at the same time a lot of structure. And I think that's very important.
It's interesting because we're seeing in milestones that the teams that have very strict cadence and rituals and are very good at running that, they have higher engagement scores, and that was even more so during COVID-19 because they could fall back on those routines. So they all know, for instance, that on Tuesday it's ideation, and that's when you give your ideas, and on Friday it's retrospective, so that's when you give your feedback. But you start getting a cadence and some rituals that makes it easy to do the right thing, and then you have lots of freedom within that framework. But we are certainly experiencing what Kenneth is mentioning as well. We have a lot of innovators and we have a lot of entrepreneurs, and sometimes they get a really, really good idea on a Wednesday, and then Tuesday is a long way away. But that's where the flexibility comes in. I would like to ask you another question around diversity and inclusion, because it's something that is not so fashionable anymore, but we're talking about these cross-functional teams, and we're talking about putting people from different kinds of the businesses. Kenneth, you also mentioned people from different countries in the same team working together, and with all the methodology and structure and the rest of it, they're still very different individuals. What's your experience with that?
I can tell that our new appointed COE on HR will be based in Belgium, and we have no operation in Belgium. But that's actually, to have the best qualified individual. And also for us, it has been important to send a message that us being an international organization, we also need to embrace the internationalism. And I would say we even consider that from a employee perspective, that it's a strong signal that it's not a Dane actually. It's actually somebody sitting outside the headquarters. So, it's a strong, objective individual actually heading up the HR function. But to your question about, different cultures, because we all know that Danes are not thinking alike as the Swedes and Norwegians and what have you. But I think we have opened up for, people are allowed to be different. And we need to think about that there are different dynamics and considerations in any given discussion, in any given initiative. We don't have any individual or center of excellence head of communication. But again, as part of growing up, we could see that, okay, what kind of LinkedIn strategy do we have? Do we need to update our website? What kind of fonts are we using? Should we refresh it? And we were saying, who's going to do that? And we didn't know who should do that, because it actually goes across countries, across lines of businesses. But we put together a task force with different, team members from different countries, and they came up with a recommendation. And I think just the fact that we are creating teams across in task force, whenever we have something that we would like to debate or evolve, for them to come up with a recommendation for the senior management to decide upon. I think it's without a strategy for it. It's simply just is something that is within the DNA that we know we're different, but it's only that, bringing that difference together, we come out stronger. I would say would be my experience.
Linda?
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Kenneth. And I think, diversity is one thing, but what I understand or how I perceive inclusion, that is this, you come together into a team with the capabilities you have, and you are respected for what you are, with whatever you bring to the team, and you are listened to because of what you bring to the team, not because of you have this title or come from this country or whatever. That's totally not important. So I think that's the most important thing when we talk diversity and inclusion. And definitely what we see with us when people work together in teams across borders, that it is what you bring and what you're interested in, that is what makes a great cooperation.
And I can just add to that. I mean, we work very much across borders as well. So, I mean, from my own experience, as part of many different teams where I sit with Australia online and Honduras, and I mean, we are many different cultures. But at the end of the day, I mean, the roles needs to be in place. You still have the guardrails. And whenever you actually know what is our purpose, what are we going to achieve as a team, then I think you start to have this subculture in your little team. So you need somebody to help you build this. And I mean, what we see in Roche is becoming a network organization. We work so much across borders now. So it doesn't matter that you're not a Dane. I mean, it matters is what's our purpose. And we all run for the purpose. And then you actually, you don't discuss so much about the diversity. It's actually, we discuss what are we going to do together and what are we aiming for doing as a team. So it was just an add-on to what Kenneth and Linda just said.
Can I ask you another thing then, because you mentioned also that you have abandoned line managers, and you're also talking a little bit about how you build the shared skills in the teams. But as something that comes up very often in that type of organization, and probably you see as well, Kenneth, is the deep skills. So people have different roles and they are unique. That's why it's a cross-functional team. But if we teach them all the same thing and they stay in the cross-functional team for too long, then they all become generalists, and then we have no experts anymore, and that's a problem. And in the old days, not that long ago actually, you would have a line manager that would look into things like capability building and making sure that people had the right skills and development plans. So how do you make sure that people are actually still experts in these cross-functional teams?
Well, I can just start. We work with the T-shaped capabilities. You know that you have the very deep expert knowledge, and then you have sort of the other horizontal part of the T, where you have the interpersonal skills and other things you know about, and you know, you go into any teamwork with that T-shape and whatever you can bring. And then we like our people also to work in another area than they usually do, so that they get new capabilities. So maybe they have two sets of expert knowledge, you can say, and that sort of makes it more fluid, makes it more agile, how they can work together and which teams they can work. I mean, in a medical company as we are, it's when you have expert knowledge, it's really deep knowledge. So it's good if people also have like another set of skills that they can use. So
if you have them in sprint teams for a while, how do you make sure that the deep medical, in this case, knowledge is still relevant after they've been sprinting for a while?
Yeah, but that's actually, I mean, you referenced to our lack of the line manager, but it is actually the job of our center heads to coach and develop their people, right? And it's we also say that it's the employee, it's him or herself who is responsible for the development, or their own development plan, and then you are coached by your leader. So it's a cooperation between the leader and the employee, and then we've got our 90 days goals, objectives, and then we can see, okay, what's coming, what would be the need for us in the next 90 days, and also looking further ahead, and then we can develop whatever we need of capabilities. We also change, you know, our product portfolio changes, so we need to look ahead and see which capabilities do we need in the future and what do we need to develop in our people. So it's not always that we need to hold on to an expert knowledge. Sometimes we need to develop a new one, or look out in the organization and see who has got this this capability, this deep therapeutic knowledge, if that's what we're looking for.
Jesper, I should just say we're just about out of time, so probably another minute or so.
Okay, I think then I would just, last question is around psychological safety, because you all mentioned that people should experiment, they should get feedback, etc., etc., etc. But that requires an environment where that's a risk worth taking and something you get away with. How do you create the psychological safety required for people to act in this way? You just share your maybe top two things.
I think if I may answer that, I think again it's very much about the culture, that it is actually okay to make mistakes. Nobody will be extremely mad or angry, but you're actually saying that was a good thought. You know, it was a good idea. We tested it; it didn't work. But what is our learnings from that? Maybe we can use that in a different manner. But you know, certainly that you never blame. You know, I think that is kind of, you should motivate. We tried it, we tested it. Yes, it didn't work. But what are the learnings? Take that back, and then we initiate something new. But if you blame, then you kill initiative.
So culture and leadership model. Linda, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think that I really like that you actually highlight this, because psychological safety is, of course, one of the most important things in a team and in an organization. So, and what we are doing within the teams is very much trying to actually figure out how can we as a team come together and feel this kind of safety where it's okay to do some mistakes or whatever we call it. Actually, we have discussed kind of a lot, should we have a wall of failures? But actually we have said, I mean, why should we call it a wall of failures? I mean, why not wall of successes, failures, where we can actually learn? Because we learn whenever we fail. So what we're trying to induce is very much a culture within the teams where we try to work together with the team members to have this kind of trust. But it comes down to the trust. It's totally fundamental for us as humans. If we do not have the trust, you will never have the psychological safety. So that is basically what we're trying to achieve all the time, and really work with our colleagues on that. Yeah, Linda, maybe you have some.
We could go on all day probably, but then Therese is gonna mute me eventually. So I think before that happens, I'll hand back to you, Therese.
Oh, thank you so much, Jesper. Thank you so much for moderating, and thanks to Kenneth, Mette, and Linda for sharing your insight today. I think this is a great kickoff for our Agile HR program this year for the committee, and I think that that all of these topics are going to come up in different forms throughout the year. So thanks so much. So with that in mind, keep your eye out for the second installment of the Agile HR program, which will be about the employee experience and driving engagement. And you can also check out all of AmCham's event programs on our website at amcham.dk. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you guys in person later this year. So with that, stay safe.